Okay, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. I hope you're all in good health and happiness. And today we're going to study the story about Noah. Everyone thinks we all understand the story. It's obvious that people were evil. The Lord decided that humanity could no longer continue, but he was going to save the one righteous person and his family, Noah. So the story, as it's normally presented, is God punishes the bad people, saves the good people, and that's the way it goes. And that's a good moral. We could all be in favor of it. The only thing is, if we look at the story more carefully, there are questions that arise. Number one, if God wasn't happy with humanity, why didn't he just get rid of everybody and start all over again? Why save Noah? Number two, the world was destroyed. There was a big flood that came. And afterwards, was the world any better than it was before? No, the people were just as bad, and nothing really was gained much by the flood. Number three, so Noah was a righteous man. Let's say that he was indeed. God said he was. But there were plenty of people that were alive who were innocent. There were babies, there were children who couldn't have been big sinners. They couldn't have been so terrible. So if God was angry, why destroy the whole world? Why destroy everybody? Why not save a whole bunch of good people and then get rid of the bad people? Why just Noah and his family? And it was looking at Noah's personality itself. What was his great achievement? What was the greatness of Noah? If we just study the parts that the Torah tells about him, we don't see a full three-dimensional figure. We have bits and pieces about him, but we don't get the feeling that we really know him as a human being. So let's look a little bit more carefully at the story and see what it's really about. We mentioned last week that there were two lines of people. One came from Cain, after Cain was banished after having killed his brother Abel. And then Adam and Eve had another son, Seth, Shet in Hebrew. And those two lines, if you look at the names of the lines, they're pretty much identical from generation to generation for 7 generations, until they come to Lemech, which is the 7th line in the line. And they both have Lemechs. One Lemech, the one who descends from Cain, is a murderer. The other Lemech has a son called Noah. The Torah is definitely trying to describe two different groups of people. It starts off with Cain and Abel. Abel, theoretically, is the good guy. He brought an offering and that was received by the Lord. Abel's a good guy, and Cain is the bad guy. And Cain gets banished. Okay. Then afterwards, we have two lines. The line of Cain, they're very productive, they do good things, but basically, they're godless, they're bad. Seth's line, they called upon the Lord. They are religious, they have a piety to them, and that's the good line. And Noah descends from the Shet line. He comes from the good line of people. That's why God says, Noah followed the godly ways, and he was a good man. It means everybody else pretty much followed the Cain line. There was a theory that they intermarried, Cain line and the Shet line intermarried, and evil has more popularity than good, and they're able to prevail in society. There's an interesting article written by Rabbi Chaim Angel many years ago. It appeared in the Chacham Gaon Memorial volume, and he quotes a great Italian Jewish scholar, M.D. Cassuto, who basically made a description of these two lines of people and shows that one line is the good guys and one line is the bad guys. Then we come to Noah. So Lemech has a son, Vayikra et Shemo Noach, and he said, I'm going to call my son Noah. I'm going to give him this name. Why? This one is going to console us. Noah, the word Noah means something. It's not just a name. Noah means a consoler. Noah means peaceful, calm, serene. This Noah is going to calm things down. So he had great hope in this little child, Noah. Then right at the very end of the first chapter, the first parasha of Bereshit, chapter 6, it says, God saw that there's too much evil in the world. And everything that people, all of their intentions were for evil. And then it says, Vayinachem Hashem al kol ki asad. Vayinachem, he was saying, and God repented having created humanity. Interestingly, the word Noah is also there. So Noah has two flavors. One, this Noah is going to console us, is to be righteous, calm, serene, calm things down. On the other hand, when God uses the word Noah, God repents for having created humanity. Noah was a failure. Humanity was a failure. Now, we believe, of course, that God was very wise. And if God created the world ahead of time, didn't he know ahead of time that human beings are going to be bad? There'll be good people and bad people. He created within us both tensions, good and bad. Of course, he knew that. And these stories that are in the Bible are showing us the development of humanity as we understand it. We're not plaster saints, we're not perfect, and we're not devils, we're not horrible people, but rather we are mixtures. So the beginning of the Torah kind of makes it black and white. There are good people and bad people. There's a good line and a bad line. Now with Noah, we're going to start seeing a new kind of humanity, that both of these qualities are found in the same person, not in two different lines, but in the same exact person. So let's look at the story of Noah itself. This is the story of Noah. It's chapter 6 in the book of Genesis. Noah ish tzaddik tamim haya bedorotav. Noah was a righteous and a pure man in his generation. Eta Elohim hitadech Noah. Noah walked with God. You can't get a better compliment than that. God is describing Noah as a tzaddik, as a tamim, as a person who's righteous and pure. He walks with God. Woo, that's a very high class recommendation. He'll get into any graduate school with that recommendation. So it sounds like Noah is ideal. He's the everyman. He's the best man. He's a superman. He's perfect. So what did Noah do? Let's just look at that again. The Torah specifies he was righteous in his generation. So our rabbi is being very picky at the words of the Torah. Says, what do you mean in his generation? It means everyone else was so bad. By comparison, he was good. Doesn't mean he really was good. But in his generation, he was good, but he had very little, the bar was very low. But if he had been living in a generation of Abraham, no one would have noticed him. If he was living among real righteous people, Noah would have been a nothing. Other rabbis say, to their credit, Noah, if you could be a righteous in a wicked world, you have to really be very special. I mean, to be, if everyone is out there doing wrong things and acting corruptly, and you have the fortitude to withstand all of that peer pressure, then that shows Noah was really a very superior human being. So the rabbis have trouble trying to identify, was Noah really a great person? Or was Noah a middling person, but he had very little competition in terms of righteousness? If we look at the story more carefully, we'll see that Noah was, I'll go back to the phrase I used before, from English literature, every man. He was a normal human being. He wasn't a superstar, and he wasn't a horrible person. He was a regular human being as we start to know human beings. So God says later on, God looked at the world. They're all bad people, terrible people. And God said, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I am about to destroy them with the earth. So God gets very upset. Here's a question, which I'm not going to answer exactly, but did this flood actually happen? Is this a historical story? The answer is, for our purposes, it doesn't matter. For our purposes, if it's a parable, that's also fine. But there are in ancient traditions, in Babylonian tradition, there are a lot of folklore going way back when, that there was a big flood that destroyed humanity and some few survived it. Maybe there was an ice age, maybe there was some kind of big, massive flood for that area. It doesn't really matter. But some people try to look at for signs of historical. Noah was really a flood to destroy everybody, but the Torah doesn't tell us the story as history. Although I'm not saying it wasn't history, but for our purpose, it's really a moral story, a parable story. So God decides to destroy the whole world, but God saves Noah because Noah was the righteous one, which goes back to our original story. That's how it's usually taught, that God rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. Okay, so God says to Noah, Noah, I want you to build an ark because I'm going to destroy the whole world and I'm going to bring a flood. God could have thought of 1,000 different ways to destroy the world. He didn't have to make a flood. So why did he do it this way? So according to our midrashim and other commentaries of the rabbis, God wanted this to be a process. He wanted the world to see Noah building this ark, which took a long time, and gather all the animals together. And they'll see, oh, the flood's coming, they'll all repent. Of course, nobody repented. So Noah made this ark. And the Torah specifies, Vayaz Noah, and Noah followed God's command just as God commanded him. Well, why would we expect him not to follow God's command? This is a way the Torah underscores here is an obedient person. God commanded him, build this ark because I'm going to destroy the world. And Noah did exactly what God told him, did exactly to the square inch. Rabbis and our midrashim take him to task. Why didn't he complain? Like Abraham complained about Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, God, maybe there are more righteous people. Why are you only saving me? It's a big thing to destroy the whole world. Why don't you have more mercy? He didn't pray for anybody. God told him, I'm going to destroy the world, build an ark, and that's what Noah did. Is this a sign of a great human being? Yes and no. Yes, he followed God's instructions. You don't argue with God. No, it was a pretty horrible instruction. He should have spoken up. He could have spoken up. Noah was Noah. He was calm. He was serene. Whatever you tell him to do, he does. Okay. So God says to Noah, and God said, Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteous before me in this generation. So that's another very nice compliment to Noah. Noah, you are alone of all the people in the world. You alone have I, God, seen to be a righteous person. And what does the Torah then say? Vayaz Noach kol asher tzivahu Adonai. And Noah did just as God commanded him. Again, the Torah underlines Noah was obedient. Is that good or is it bad? Well, it's good, you listen to God. It's bad because why didn't he speak up? Why didn't he show some gumption as a human being? He didn't. God says build an ark, he built an ark. God says collect the animals, he collected the animals. God says save your family, he saved his family. Okay. Then after the flood, the water settled down and God spoke to Noah. And he said, the flood is coming to an end. Go. It's time for you to come out of the ark and together with your wife and your sons, etc., and all the animals, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what did Noah do? Then Noah built an altar to God, and taking of every pure animal and of every pure bird, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. Ooh. He saved, if you remember, he saved 2 of every animal. But the pure animals, they already had a concept of kasher animals in those days, according to the Torah. The pure animals, they had 7 of each of them, so he could spare some of them. So he takes them and he starts offering sacrifices. Who do you remember sacrificed animals before? Hevel. Remember, Hevel was a shepherd, and Hevel offered animals to God. And what happened? God liked that very, very much. God thought that was terrific. Cain only offered fruits and vegetables, and God wasn't too pleased with that. God was a carnivore. He wanted meat. And what does Noah do after the flood? First thing he does is he builds an altar and he sacrifices animals. That's, let's say, good and bad. Good, very thoughtful. God, thank you for saving us. We appreciate it, and thank you very much. Bad, he's killing animals. The whole world is just destroyed. There's so few animals left. Okay, so there's 7 of the pure ones. You're going to kill them already? Or start killing. God needs your animals? What goes wrong with you? Noah has a little bit of Cain in him, a little bit of Hevel in him, I should say. He still has the shepherd mentality. He still wants to find favor in God's eyes. And this is also poetic, that he falls back. Hevel was approved by God because he brought animals. I want to be approved by God, and I bring animals. Okay. And then the Torah goes on. And God smelled the odor of the meat, and he was very happy. Never again will I doom the earth because of humankind, since the devisings of the human mind are evil from youth. Nor will I ever again destroy every living being as I have done before. Who made us evil? Who created us to be evil? God did it himself. When God created us, he didn't create us to be angels with, not like our angel with capital A, little a's. He didn't create us to be perfect. He created us with these good and bad tendencies. And if the bad tendency is weighted at 51% to 49%, who put us into that? God did. So it's very odd to think that God created humanity, knowing that we have a propensity to evil, and then punishes us for evil that he planted within us. The answer is the Torah is really telling us this. It's not 51-49, it's 50-50. And even if it's 50.5 towards evil, we have the power, like God told Cain, we could control ourselves. We don't, even though we have a tendency towards evil, we have also a tendency toward good. We have the power to do good. But God realizes, I created humanity to have good and evil, and I'm going to put up with it. Okay, I lost my patience at first. I destroyed everybody. I'm not going to do that again. That's the wrong solution, because I don't want to do it that way. I want people to have free will. I want them to deal with the good and evil, but and I'm not going to punish them. So God made a covenant, and he said the rainbow is going to be the eternal sign of the covenant. We all know that part of the story. Now, what does Noah do? Oh, excuse me. And then when God makes his covenant, he emphasizes how important human life is. He says to Noah, just like he told Adam and Eve, Peru, be fruitful and multiply. I want to create humanity over again. We're going to have a multiplicity of people. And then God says, you're not allowed to kill anybody. Whoever sheds human blood by human hands, that blood shall be shed. In other words, murder is bad. Don't murder people. Human life is precious. What is he reminding Noah? The Cain and Abel story again. Murder is bad. You murder your Cain. It's a bad thing. We don't want to have that happening anymore. We want you to be fruitful and multiply. And we want you to he's saying to Noah, you come from the line of Seth, the line of God-fearers. Stay that way. The line of Cain is the line of trouble. What was Cain? Cain was a farmer. Not that farmers are bad, chas v'shalom. We couldn't live without farmers. But in the story, it happens that the bad person is a farmer. So after this whole story happens, and God makes this covenant with Noah, what's the first thing that our friend Adam does? Noah, the tiller of the soil. Noah, Noah, the tiller of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. All of a sudden, Noah, he's just done with a flood. He gets a tremendous covenant from God. Everything is terrific. What's the first thing he does? He becomes a farmer. He plants stuff. Who was the first farmer? Cain. The Torah doesn't tell us that, but you could put the pieces together. And what does he plant? He doesn't plant wheat. He doesn't plant oats. He doesn't plant corn. What does he plant? They didn't know about corn in those days anyway. That's according to the New World. He planted a vineyard and he got drunk. Okay. So by becoming a farmer, that already puts him in the Cain line, the line of the wicked Cain. He planted a vineyard of all things, and he got drunk. So the rabbis tried to excuse him. They say, well, there was no wine before. He didn't know it was intoxicating. He just made a beverage and he let it sit a little too long. It got intoxicated. It fermented, it became wine. He didn't know. Maybe. Might also be that he knew darn well what wine was, and he was overwhelmed. I mean, how would any of us feel if the whole world, God forbid, a nuclear explosion killed all of humanity, and just us, our family, survived? How would we feel? What an overwhelming responsibility. Why did we survive all this? All those people that died, it's horrible. And now I've got to build a whole new future. I'm not up to it. So Noah got drunk as an escape mechanism, basically saying, God, you picked me. I was a righteous person, but I can't do it. If you remember the first pasuk in Noah, it says, Noah, Ish Sadiq Tamim. It's called Ish Sadiq, a righteous man. Here, after the flood, he's called Ish Ha'adamah, the man of the earth. He's no longer this Ish Sadiq, this righteous, pious person representing the ideal love of God. He's now just a plain, ordinary farmer, a man of the earth. He's like Adam. What does Adam mean? Earth. He becomes the new Adam. But this new Adam is different from the first Adam. This new Adam is now a combination of Cain and Abel, and Shet, actually. He descends from Shet, from the line of righteousness. He brought animal offerings like Abel, and he planted grapes. He became a farmer like Cain. Noah is now Cain, Abel, and Seth all in one person. He now becomes a combination of it. That's the opposite of Noah. Noah means calm, serene. Noah is now not calm and serene. He's torn. He's terrified. He's confused. He's not called Tzaddik anymore. He's called Ish Adamah. Well, when he's drunk, what happens? We know the story. He behaved in an irresponsible way. He was undressed. His son came in and saw him and came out and told his brothers. The brothers came and covered him up. Okay. When Noah woke up from his wine and he learned what his youngest son had done to him, namely this youngest son saw him in his shame and didn't cover him up, he said, "Cursed be Canaan." He didn't curse his son. He cursed his grandson. He cursed Ham's son, Canaan. "You will always be a slave." If the father did the sin, why are you cursing the grandson? And then he goes on and talks about his other sons. Noah lost his temper. We see a person who's enraged. Who is he enraged at? Of course, he's enraged at his son who didn't respect his privacy. And he must be angry at his grandson. Maybe the grandson did something that antagonized him at some point. But what kind of parent or grandparent curses their family? This is not normal. And it was his fault. He was the one who undressed himself. He was the one who was behaving as a drunkard. He should have apologized. We start now to see that Noah, this Ish Tzaddik that we saw at the beginning of the parasha, as being the one who's supposed to console humanity for being such a good person. This Noah is now a torn person. He's a drunkard. He's a shameless person. He's a person who curses his own family. We're losing respect for Noah very fast. So why does the Torah tell us this? The Torah tells us that, you know what? Noah isn't just Noah. Noah is what each of us could be. Each of us has these two things within us, the line of Cain, the line of Shet. Each of us is torn. And Noah, who was originally the Ish Tzaddik, the righteous person, when push comes to shove, he couldn't take crisis. He just couldn't take it. And he cracked. He got drunk. He cracked, he cursed his family. Don't be that way. Sometimes the Torah teaches us things not as positive models, but by giving us negative role models. These are mistakes, folks, you shouldn't follow. Don't get drunk. Don't curse your family. Don't lose hope. But if I gave you the power to be an Ish Tzaddik, be an Ish Tzaddik, be a righteous person. Stick to your guns. Try to be righteous. Try to be good. That's the story of Noah. It's not a story that God picks this righteous person and he survives. It's that Noah is now transforming from this kind of ethereal, righteous person who's perfectly pure into a real human being that we know. Ish Adamah, a man of the earth, a plain person like us. And he's faced in conflict. And he sometimes could rise above it. He follows, he's obedient to God. But often he's not. In the end of the story of Noah, we don't see a person that we want to emulate. We see a person who basically is a broken human being. You would think that after surviving this flood and being chosen by God, he would feel a sense of grandness. Look how good I am. Look how terrific I am. But that wasn't our Noah. Noah was a failure ultimately. After telling us about this inner conflict that Noah now has, that we all have basically, between good and evil, it's not that there's a good line and a bad line, a good brother and a bad brother. It's that each one of us, within us, has both Cain and Abel. We have Cain and Shet pulling and tugging at us. Then the Torah tells us this very strange story about the Tower of Babel. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this. The Tower of Babel is basically described as these people after the flood. Noah, by the way, is still alive, although we don't hear a word about him interceding in any way about the tower, this tower. If you want to see a good story, a good article about it, if you go back to our website, jewishideas.org, Rabbi Chaim Angel has an interesting article how the story is interpreted in terms of Babylonian mythology also. Anyway, here's what happens. God looks at the world, and these people got together, and all the people, it says, were, the whole earth was of one language, uniform words. It came to pass, as they migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said one to the other, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top shall reach to heaven. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered all over the earth. The Torah describes this as being an act of ultimate arrogance. Here are these people that want to build a skyscraper, and their idea is, I'm going to build it all to the sky, and we're just as good as God. We'll fight with God. In ancient Babylonian mythology, they actually had these ziggurats, where they built these big high things as a sign that humanity is, we could have a connection with God. We're pretty tough. We're pretty strong. We can reach to God. Now, it sounds like, at first glance, that this sounds like an ideal society. The Torah says, here are people who are united. They all speak the same language. They all get together for a common project. What could you ask for better? Somehow or other, though, God sniffs this situation and he doesn't like it. And the Torah says God descends and he confuses their language so they shouldn't be able to finish their project. And he scatters them to all parts of the world. So all the nations of the world developed from the Tower of Babel, and all the different languages emerged as well. So it looks like God was angry at them. Now, yes, it does look like that. But what really happened, in my humble opinion, God sees that everyone was speaking one language. They had one project. The only problem was that this project wasn't a godly project. It was an anti-godly project. This was a project that wasn't originated by a godlike spirit, but rather a human spirit. We are going to defy God. We're going to show we're just as capable of ruling this universe as God is. We're going to go all the way to heaven. We're going to make our own skyscraper, so to speak. It's a sign of arrogance. Now, on the one hand, it's good. Human beings should show initiative. It's very important. On the other hand, if they unite to do something bad, that's not a great thing. Union, we always say unity is important. It is. But God is trying to teach us something different. Unity is important, but uniformity is not. It's good to have diversity. When God comes down, he wants them, he jumbles up their languages so that they become a Babel, a confusion, a babel of languages and people. They can't communicate easily with each other. Why did these people build the altar, this tower in the first place? The Torah tells us that they scattered. Originally, society after the flood was in one location. But as people multiplied, they moved to the suburbs, they moved further and further away. And the people in the original place said, you know what? If society keeps spreading away, we're going to lose our control. How can we gain control? If we build a big, big tower, no matter how far people are away, they'll be able to see the tower. And they'll realize we're still the bosses. We're still one society. This is basically a totalitarian system. There's one agency in control, and everybody who's spread out have to relate to this one central authority. God said, no, I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be different nations, different opinions, different tastes, different languages. Humanity should be a multiplicity. So this story is told as though God is punishing them, but in fact, it's actually, again, I will call it a consequence. The consequence of you wanting to be builders of this tower is you want to have human autonomy. You want to be able to show your power. Good. We're going to spread it all over the world, and you're going to have to figure out how to get along by yourselves. So let me go back to the beginning. God just created the world, and the stories are basically telling us this. Human beings have good and bad. They can unite for good things. They can unite for bad things. Noah, within himself personally, had good and bad. Sometimes he obviously showed great strength. Sometimes he showed terrible failure and terrible weakness. After Noah, society spread out. This is basically saying, you know what, folks? It's now up to you. God is saying, I created the groundwork, I created a humanity. I gave you good and evil. I gave you stories on how to balance and how you can have control over good, how your control of good could be dominant over the forces of evil. I showed you how a society spreads out with different languages in different lands. And now humanity, guess what? It's up to you. God says, I'm not going to destroy humanity again. God made a covenant. But God didn't say we can't destroy ourselves. God was very, very precise. God, I will not destroy you. I'm not going to bring another flood. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the power to destroy ourselves. In fact, sometimes we wonder if humanity isn't hell-bent on destroying ourselves with nuclear power, with ecological crises, with global warming, through our own carelessness and inefficiencies and hatreds. And right now we're on the verge of a war, possibly in the Ukraine. You see that the forces of evil are still very strong within humanity. We haven't conquered these things. We haven't learned the lessons of the Torah. But God is saying, I'm not going to destroy you next time. But if there's going to be a destruction, it's on you. I chose to create humanity to be free. I chose to create humanity to be diverse. I chose to have humanity have within them good and evil tendencies. And my challenge to you is be good. Whoa, that's the challenge of the Torah. And that's really the whole challenge of religion. We're going to stop at this point. And next week, we're going to deal with another story, probably the most complicated story in Tanakh, the story of Yakida, when God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. It's a very tough story, but I think you'll see how it ties into the first three sessions that we've had up to now. I wish you all a wonderful day, good health, happiness, hatzlacha rabah, and everything that you do, and God willing, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you all. And we should always see you for happy.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Concluding Katan Allegri.
Yes, good to see you. Thank you so much. Be well, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care.